All right, so since it's 5:30, I think we'll call the meeting to order. This is the Human Rights Committee, and this is Thursday, June 11th. We're calling the meeting to order at 5:31 p.m. Because this is a different format, I'm going to read the procedures from the town about how this meeting operates, since it's different than our in-person meetings. So here are the remote meeting procedures for the town of Easton. In keeping with the ongoing emergency order from Governor Charlie Baker to limit gatherings and maximize social distancing, and under legislation passed to address remote board meetings during the emergency declaration, this meeting is being conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board members is remote, and this remote attendance counts towards a quorum. This meeting is being broadcast live and is being recorded on ECAT. While conducting this meeting remotely, we will endeavor to keep meeting operations as close to our standard procedures as possible. However, use of this Zoom platform necessitates some additional meeting protocols. One, board members are on video and audio, as well as town staff. Public participants, the attendees, are joining the meeting muted and with no video feed. For this meeting, if attendees have a question or a comment, they may put them in the Q&A box. The Q&A is only seen by the panelists, who are the people you see on your screen now. However, when you write in a question or comment, you must follow open meeting law format. So you must write your full name and you must write your address. Without that information, we cannot address any question or comment. Addressing questions or comment is at the discretion of the chair, which is me. So depending on the content of what is asked and the flow of the meeting, we may group questions, or we may reserve questions until the end, or we may not be able to address them over the course of the meeting and will endeavor to reply via email. All votes will be by roll call. And when all business indicated on the agenda has been completed, the members will vote to adjourn the meetings, signaling the end of the meeting and the termination of the ECAT recording. Okay, so our first agenda item is to review and approve minutes. Our last meeting was in March, which we got in the nick of time. You've had a chance to review the minutes, which are also available online. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Okay, Aliki makes a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second, Durance.
All right, Beth seconds. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Right, any opposed? All right.
You have to do it roll call.
Oh yeah, we should
We
do
do
it.
roll call.
Okay, Aliki, you made a motion, right? Michelle?
Durance, yes.
Allison?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Craig?
Yes.
Amy?
No.
Irene?
Here.
Do you vote to approve the minutes?
Yes.
Stephanie? Turn your volume up, Stephanie, so we can hear you.
Should be up, but yes. Can you hear
That's
me?
better. And Karen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So point of order, Michelle, should we go by last name? I was going in the format that
I know with the selectmen and school board, that's how we do it. Last name.
Yeah.
All right, I'll do my best. It may not be alphabetical looking at everyone right now. Okay. Next item on our agenda is an update on an incident in the community that was brought to the police's attention. So we have Officer Matt Badoud here, who is the town's civil rights officer and liaison to the Human Rights Committee, and Officer Badoud is going to give us an update.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes. Yes.
First of all, I know that you guys are going to try to have the meeting at 6 and you moved it to accommodate me, and I appreciate that. I do have another police matter to attend to at 6 o'clock. And to address the elephant in the room, I think that there's a lot of people in this town knows that there's some extracurricular activity that has gone on in the past 48 hours, and there's been some stuff in the media on multiple platforms referencing this incident. And just to be clear, I can't and won't get into any of that. But as a baseline, it was brought to my attention on May 7th, I'm sorry, we had a first report on May 7th from an officer about a neighbor dispute. I was unaware of any of the details of it at that time, and I didn't see the report. There was no mention of any bias or hate speech or anything of that nature that was involved with that particular incident. However, the neighborly disputes continued on, and there was a few more reports from the patrol division, at which time I did get involved. I got involved at a pretty intimate level with it, and it became a primary focus for me. And I know that the HRC committee, you guys have quite a bit of information on it. You have a lot more information than other people may be able to see. So also just a reminder from what Liz said, this is still an ongoing situation. It is rather tense. And so it's important that regardless of what's going on outside of this, that nobody's personal information is revealed or brought up. But it was investigated, and it still is being investigated thoroughly, professionally, and compassionately. I was able to build rapport both with the alleged victims in this case, as well as the alleged aggressors. And I think it's important that we realize that we focus so much on the victims in a case like this, or the alleged victims, but it's so important for us in the police world to be able to build rapport with all parties that are involved, and that facts matter, and facts matter a lot. So this really started off as arguments in a backyard, and what it ended up turning into was a lot of bickering between the two neighbors, and subsequently we started getting reports that racial slurs were being used, and particularly in this case it was the N-word. The dynamics of this particular incident is the neighbors live directly next to each other. The houses abut each other, and in one home we have a homeowner that's been living in this spot for probably around 36 years, but definitely over 30 years. The newer tenants and the complainants, they moved in roughly 4 months ago, and they are in a mixed marital relationship. The husband in this case is Black, the wife is white. They also have a 10-year-old son from a previous relationship. He is Black, and the brother of the father also lives there, who is mentally disabled and mostly nonverbal. So a lot of moving parts with this one. Currently, there's no pending charges currently. We definitely had a harassment issue. We were able to assist the family with obtaining an order from the on-call judge. And that order was also extended yesterday. And that's kind of where we're at. The affected family has decided to move out. They do have a place to go. They didn't start moving yesterday. They've been moving periodically. And I still am in contact with them almost on a daily basis.
All right, thank you, Officer Badoud. So that's a summary of an incident in town. Matt, are you at liberty to say whether the family's new location is within Easton or not?
I believe it is not in Easton. I believe they do not want to stay in Easton. I do think that they think very highly of the town of Easton. And I don't want to surmise whether or not they'll come back or not, but I do not believe that they're relocating to Easton. And I do think that they're relocating to a temporary situation.
Okay.
In other words, I believe they're moving somewhere to rent before they decide on where to purchase a home.
Okay. I asked because that information somewhat affects our committee's role in responding to this situation, and specifically in reaching out to the family who was the victim of the harassment from the neighbors. So I open it up to the committee for thoughts, given that information, about what the HRC's role is at this point, and what would be best to respond to this information.
Liz, if I could,
Mm-hmm.
we did, I had previously discussed, and I discussed with you, I do think the family will be open to speaking with either yourself or multiple committee members. I think it might behoove us to let a little time go by, as this situation is not completely resolved. But we can certainly circle back to that. And while I know their zip code might be changing, there might be some value in having them in for a discussion, hopefully maybe even in person at some point once the climate changes here. But they were asked directly about that. I did discuss with them, and a few days ago they were absolutely willing.
Okay, that's helpful information because that dovetails with other items on our agenda about our committee's role moving forward. Any thoughts or comments on this incident?
Liz, I was going to say, you know, if they are open to multiple members, I mean, I was just thinking about how vitally important it would be to take that opportunity to just gain more perspective. And if we by then don't have a sort of more direct answer as to how we can deal with these issues, hopefully they won't happen in the future, but if they do, maybe getting insight from people that actually experienced it would be, you know, really valuable. So just throwing that out there, I would totally be willing and interested.
All right, so Aliki, what I hear you saying is maybe taking them up on the offer that Matt had indicated that they might be willing to speak publicly either to our committee, to some in some other form about their experience.
Yes, exactly. And I'm glad that it was asked directly to them, because I was going to say, you know, perhaps our first step could be to reach out to them and at some point have that discussion with them for us as this committee to be able to take some further action.
Okay, and you were saying you would be willing to participate in or help facilitate
Yes.
the conversation.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
I will say just that I can tell you unequivocally that this family, for the time being, does want to be left alone for the time being, but they are open to it in the future.
Yeah, Liz, I mean, one thought. Oh. Okay. So one potential thought may be around having some outreach opportunity.
What kind of outreach opportunity?
Sorry about that. So I'm wondering if the community has been very interested, I think, in this particular case. Mm-hmm. And the fact that the family has chosen to move away from Easton, I'm wondering if other people within the community would be interested in writing letters similar to what happened. We had an incident previously in West Bridgewater, I think, where we collected letters, an outpouring of affection from people in the town, and we're able to get them to the person who was the victim of the incident.
That Market Basket incident, right? I think, yes, yeah.
So again, I'm not trying to hijack here. If I could, that particular incident, there was confirmed racial slurs that were from a white female who happened to be an Easton resident to a Brockton resident who was Black. In and of itself, it was just a freedom of speech issue, but then they went ahead and keyed their car, I believe, and so we ended up having a hate crime, not in our jurisdiction, but was over there. And I don't want to get too far into the moving parts and some of the stuff that's been going on over the past 48 hours. And I've been dealing with that, as Liz knows, predominantly my entire shift yesterday and all day today, and I'm still working on it. My suggestion, and it is only a suggestion, I would hold off on that. Again, I believe that maybe a few days ago that would have been welcomed by this family. But based off of some of the events that occurred in the past 48 hours, they really just want some breathing room. They just want some time away from all of this. And I've spent countless hours on the phone with them, and I feel pretty confidently about that. But I would absolutely circle back with them, you know, once the dust settles. And I think it would be an appreciated gesture, but I think that the timing with this particular incident would be important.
It's Craig Barger. Thank you for intervening in this situation. So I appreciate that. You referenced the last 48 hours. Are those details something you are not able to talk with the committee about at this point, or are those separate from the actual alleged incidents that happened between the neighbors?
It's going to be both. It's part of the situation. And I really can't discuss it at this point.
Okay, thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
If I can ask just a follow-up there. I completely respect and I hear what you're saying, Matt. Would that also include sometimes when there's an incident that happens, we put out a statement as a community? So would your recommendation also be to hold on that statement? And I also wonder down the road, right? And we wouldn't be able to pull this off anyway. Even in the practice of restorative justice or restorative practice, even if there's not somebody who's there who shows up, the harmed party is not there, there's a way to facilitate and repair the harm that was had on the community. So the parties here wouldn't have to participate, but I wonder if that's something that would be open or folks would be willing to do as well as a way for the town to address this and continue to learn and not move past it. I don't think we ever should, but also grow from it. So again, there would be no participation that would be required, but I know that there are towns who have used such a mechanism to help towns process.
Speaking about a letter for the town, could you say the beginning of that again?
No, so I think number one is we sometimes as a committee would put out a statement in regards of we've been made aware. So I'm hearing from you that that might be something that would put a pause on right now, just in the interest and what we're hearing from the parties who are involved.
I would, and again, that's sort of doubling back. If you had asked me that 48 hours ago, I would have a different answer for you.
And I understand. So that's number one. I completely, and I want to respect their wishes. I don't think we would ever put something out without getting kind of some feedback from that. But secondly, and we wouldn't be able to do this currently or even within the next 2 weeks, but eventually, is there a way in which we as a town, not through letters, I guess that could be one mechanism, but some sort of facilitated dialogue that we can have as a town about this issue? In the spirit of restorative justice, it's usually two parties coming together, identifying the harm and repairing the harm. Where those parties might not be present, I still think that there's an opportunity for the town to come together and kind of understand and how do we heal from this?
I'm going to interject here because there are a couple things floating around which are all tied together and sort of linking your question, Beth, with Matt, the concerns that you brought up. In terms of the writing letters of support, I agree, time and space is good. I also think realistically, it would be at least a week before we got the message out there, letters were written, delivered to town hall, one of us goes to pick them up, finds the right way to get it to the family. So I would lean towards, if the committee votes towards doing the letters, of doing it, and then Matt waiting for your okay, or whomever else is in contact with the family, or if it's one of us, to deliver them, but that we would kind of already have them set if people felt like they wanted to write. So that's one point.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to focus too much on the stuff that I can't get into, because I know that it just opens and leads to more questions. That being said, I will say some of what occurred over the past 48 hours was almost as upsetting to this particular family as the actual ongoing incident that they were previously dealing with. So it is raw. They kind of waved the white flag and said, hey, we really just want to be left alone. We just want some peace for a little while. They are very appreciative of the town of Easton in general. My genuine feeling that I get from them is that they don't, while they had a very bad experience themselves, I don't think they look negatively upon the town of Easton in and of itself. And that's because of the outpouring of support that they did get.
Okay. So noted that I think the message is loud and clear that any direct action at this point is not the right way to go to show support for the family. We have a question from Michelle Browning at 13 Homes. How do we make sure the home is welcoming or safe for the next residents, which dovetails with Beth's concern of, well, what do we do going forward? Like, the community has been affected by this, by hearing about this incident to whatever extent people have heard about it, right? And so that's, I think, a little bit where, Beth, you might be going with the restorative justice. And then Michelle's question is also pretty practical.
Yeah, from my perspective, I don't know. I don't want to make up an answer, for the committee here and now. You're going to have a completely different resident that possibly moves into that home, and everybody's different. Everybody's unique. We have no idea what they're going to want. You don't know. Maybe they don't want to know anything about the previous incident. Maybe they want to have the opportunity to just live their own life and make assessments for themselves. I don't think it would be necessarily good for instance, for people to go and warn other people about other people. This incident was unique. It was unique to itself. And again, this isn't a popular view, but we also have to look out for the safety and the best interest of everybody that's involved. And that also includes people that were allegedly accused of a crime or wrongdoing. We don't know what they're doing to better themselves. And again, this is still ongoing. So this has not been completely resolved at this point.
Okay.
Go ahead. And I'm just wondering would it make sense if the committee said something like, it has come to our attention about a particular incident, and whatever Matt thinks is appropriate to be able to put out, and that we as a committee want people to be aware that Easton is a welcoming community, and do it on a positive side rather than responding to a particular incident or trying to put anybody in a bad situation. Would that make more sense at this point than being specific about what actually happened? Does that make any sense?
Craig, for me personally, I'm all for positive vibes all the way around. I think there's so much negative news in this world, and there's so many great things that happen that I like that idea. I still just think that we have to do something at the appropriate time. And again, this situation has not resolved yet. And so it's still kind of ongoing. I think we might be getting closer, but we're still not quite out of the woods yet. And speaking of repairing, there's definitely repairing that has to happen. But me personally, I like the idea of sending something out with positive vibes. That's just me.
Matt, I know you have to duck out soon. We have a question. Karen, do you want to, there's a question there that I think is particularly for Matt to answer.
Andrew Aberson.
Yep.
For Flint Lane, is there any precedent in Easton for a force other than the police to deal with hate crimes?
Can you read it one more time for me?
Sure. Is there? It's okay. You moved it. It's all right. Is there any precedent in Easton for a force other than the police to deal with hate crimes?
Any precedent? Any other alternatives other than the police to deal with hate crimes?
Correct.
So it's, you have to get more particular. So we'll investigate. We'll investigate. That's a good question. So we'll be involved with any type of investigation where we think that there's a possibility that any crime has been committed, regardless of whether hate is involved or bias or anything of that nature. And from there, if we believe that we have probable cause that we actually have a hate crime and it's prosecutable, then we bring partners into the town, much like we would for a sexual assault. It doesn't rely solely on the Easton Police. There's actually a lot of people that get involved, and we would start with the district attorney, and we would send some preliminary reports. They would look through them and see if we meet the standards for the crimes. That happens with every crime too. We have to make sure that we have the probable cause. They call it PCing reports. Generally, the clerk magistrates do it. If they PC it and they find that we do have an actual hate crime and it's PCable and it's going to move forward and they're going to file the charges, me as a civil rights officer, there's some particular forms that I would fill out for FBI informational reasons and for data collection, but also we would be getting liaisons. And I'm not an expert, so I don't know where they would all come from, but we would probably get some liaisons from the DA's office, probably the state police, and likely from the FBI office in Boston. And so we would get a lot of people involved with that, and we would certainly have people that specialize in this. So it kind of starts at our level and then goes up. But no, we don't have an alternate source within Easton that exclusively would respond to a hate crime instead of the police.
Yeah, the short legal answer to that question, Andrew, is that a crime by definition is something which is prosecuted by the government. So in any situation, there could be both criminal cases or criminal charges and civil charges. Civil means it's brought by an individual or an entity which is affected. Criminal means the government is doing the prosecuting, and there are just sort of different causes of action. Are there any further questions for Matt before he heads out? All right. Thank you so much, Matt. We appreciate you joining us. Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thank you for
know
your
there's a lot of,
service.
I know there's a lot of questions out there. Thank you for accommodating me and starting the meeting earlier. And Liz, thanks for your support, and we'll be in touch.
All right.
Matt, thank you for your service to the town.
you.
We appreciate it.
Thank you, folks. Appreciate you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'll use
So
this.
Liz, maybe a reminder to the attendees around submitting questions, that they would need to go ahead and provide their name and address, and that we cannot answer anonymous questions. Just a reminder to the group.
Thank you. Read my mind. All right. Any other comments on the community incident? It sounds like from what I heard, there is no, it would not be helpful to the family to be doing anything immediate right now. Did anyone reach a different conclusion or have an idea about what our role is and when our role would enter?
I think, you know, that's, sorry, I like to just struggle with like everything that's going on lately, but I think what Matt said is really important to emphasize the fact that it's still an ongoing investigation. And, you know, we have to also, since the police is involved and we're asked to be involved, we have to let them complete their job, you know. I think in order for us to correctly choose the route that we're going to take, but it's hard, we can't do anything mid-investigation. And I hope that people realize that too.
Yeah, the only thing though is that because this did impact a direct Easton resident, kind of along the lines of our communication policy, we would go ahead and issue something publicly. Yeah. So in lieu of, I recognize the police has obviously shared some documentation with us. We recognize that there have been a lot of communication on social media around this particular incident. And it sounds like the family really just kind of wants some peace and quiet at this point, and probably, you know, no additional limelight to the situation. I think based on that feedback from Officer Badoud, I would go ahead and recommend that the committee not go ahead and put out a public statement on this particular incident, but wanted to have the other committee members weigh in on that.
I agree. I think we should check in with Officer Dude regularly and figure out when is the right time, and based on what the family needs, we decide from there.
I agree.
I agree, but I think it feels funny not putting out a statement. And so, you know, I think just making sure that we are very, stay in touch with Matt and make sure we know as soon as we can to do that, because I feel like that we're the committee, we should be saying something.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the key to this, though, is when we do issue communication, we typically would like to issue communication not just from a education standpoint to the community about the incident, but also from an action standpoint, where we can provide the community with some sort of response opportunity. And in this case, because we have one piece of it, which is the summary of the event, and not necessarily the response or support the community can provide to the family at this point, waiting would be the best suggestion. So I think that's a great point, Kathy.
We also don't have the investigation is not complete. We don't even know exactly what we're dealing with yet, you know?
So
I'm all for putting out a statement though, Kathy.
yeah,
we put
Michelle.
out a-
So going off of Craig earlier, and I'm hearing what you're saying, and I definitely think we should respect the family and the police process. Is it possible to say something like, just a general, not even mention that incident? The mission of HRC is to normally support blah, 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 blah. And sometimes the best support is to not nicely, like to not support. So to just acknowledge that we're aware without calling any incident, any attention to specifics of any kind.
Might hesitate on that.
To kind of, to play to Catherine so that we say something without saying something.
I just, even if it was broad, I think that most folks would understand where this came from. And I want to respect their wishes as far as, can we just hit the pause button? And something could change within 24 hours. We don't know, but I do want to be mindful and respectful of their request not to put something out. And if people want to be, want to criticize a lack of response, I think we just have to own that, and that we've decided to adhere to the wishes of that family as opposed to a response, because that's what we typically do. And I think we can address that when we finally put one out in some regard, not call it out specifically, but if there are questions, we can, I'd be happy to answer and say, this is why, because we adhered to the wishes that were made very clear to us by the police.
Makes sense to me.
I totally agree. Totally
I
agree,
hope
Beth.
when we do get to make a statement that we can use it as a way to educate the community about our committee, and that if they have questions and if they, or issues that they can come to us, because we're not a very visible committee at this point. And this would be a way to also share that information.
So we have 2 comments from the attendees, similar to.
Erin, could we hold off on those comments? Because I think they go towards agenda item C and some of the general statements we have made. Is that okay?
Yep, sure.
For Aliki, since you were interested in being a point person to communicate with the family, how about if you check in with Officer Badoud next week and just get a sense if anything has changed, just to sort of keep a pulse on the state of the investigation and the family's wishes. We do have the structure and templates in place such that if we get the go-ahead about communicate or putting out a statement, having it sort of recognized, we have the mechanisms to do that the way we do at other points when something happens that's time sensitive, that doesn't fit with our 48-hour open meeting law posting and agenda requirements. It's definitely not as timely and responsive as non-governmental organizations, but it might strike the compromise for our need to speak out and respect the family's wishes. How do people feel about that? Beth?
I agree.
Makes sense.
I agree.
Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Okay. So Aliki, you can send us updates as needed before our next meeting on that issue. Okay, I'm going to move on to agenda item C, which is our response to national events, which I'm going to have Amy summarize what the HRC has done recently in the last couple weeks before we were alerted about this community incident.
Sure. So our protocol is that we have a couple of templated responses that we can adapt as needed. So in particular, the response we just posted about George Floyd, I drafted it off of a template that was already approved by the committee. I sent it to the entire committee for review. Any feedback was sent back to me directly, one-on-one by email. And then once it was final, it was posted, I think it was on the 4th of this month, with links to other statements made within the community, and also some information about the peaceful protest that was at Oliver Ames. And that's basically our protocol.
So there were a couple questions about the HRC putting out general statements about tolerance or what the committee stands for, or statements in response to national events. So that information is already on our webpage, and I would encourage people who haven't seen it to look there. It is through the town's website, under committees, under human rights. And Amy is responsible for maintaining the website, and she does a great job of putting a lot of timely information up there.
One more detail is our general rule of thumb is to only post when it impacts our community directly. And I know that the George Floyd incident happened in Minneapolis, but it clearly has a deep impact on communities nearby, including our town. So that's why we chose to put it up. And also the language that we use does tie it to the unrest that our own personal community is feeling too.
Which takes us to agenda item D, which is just sort of revisiting or reclarifying what our committee's communication policy is, what we comment on, how we comment, why we choose to comment on what we do. And I think it's been reiterated several times that a policy that we had put in place at least a year ago, I want to say more than a year ago, clarified that we were going to comment on incidents that had a direct effect on our community. And that initially had meant either it occurred in Easton, or it did or was very likely to directly affect an Easton resident. So for instance, incidents like at a mosque in Sharon would likely affect Easton residents who might attend that house of worship. That would be an example of a likely to affect. So Amy's explanation is, I believe Karen and others had mentioned as well, is why we chose to comment on a national event, because it clearly was having local impact as well. Are there any questions or anything we want to go over with the communication policy?
Well, so we post it on our website. Do we post it anywhere else? And have you guys talked about having a Facebook page, or is that just
You're not allowed.
You're not allowed. Okay.
Because
there are times where we do engage the newspaper, and we have issued statements that went out more broadly.
Yes, so they might be issued with the Brockton Enterprise or the Journal Independent, but as a town committee, we cannot have our own social media platform. So anything we post online is through the Town of Easton's page. Individual members, friends, and allies are certainly welcome to, on their own accounts, link to information that's on our webpage, but that is why we communicate the way we do, because those are our requirements and limitations.
Yeah, and the only thing that I would add here is that this wasn't an easy decision for the committee. I would say, you know, in my, I don't know, 3 years, Liz, 4 years on the committee at this point, this has been a topic for us that we've been challenged with, because when incidents do occur, whether directly impacting or nationally, we feel compelled as a human rights committee to respond. What we did was we gathered kind of best practices across other human rights committees, and came to the decision that we did today. So I feel like I wanted to provide a little bit of backstory on that.
Michelle, did you want to discuss anything further on agenda item D?
No, I just felt that I think sometimes that narrow policy kind of limits our ability to react. And I think that there's times in recent events that I just felt like we were this silence, and all these things were happening around us, and all these people were reacting and supporting, and everyone's like, where's the HRC? And we weren't there, and we weren't there for them. And I felt that that was a void that in my view is why we should be there for those things. And that is how I see our committee supporting our community. And I know I've talked with a couple other people that kind of felt that we should have been there too in certain events. So I don't know, like, when do you decide that a larger event is affecting the community or not? That's a very subjective opinion.
That's why it's, I hate, that's why it ended up being narrow, because we feel the same, Michelle. We've, you know, played around with different, like, we tried to write decision trees and we tried to think through every scenario, and there's so many incidents that how do you draw the line and where do you draw the line? But I'm with you, so maybe we revisit it. I don't know.
I will say we were criticized, right? So there were times where we issued statements and we were criticized because they did not impact direct Easton families. And so I would say this, that any time an incident does occur, I do think it's worthy of bringing it to the committee's attention for discussion and determination for response. I think our default is that we need to have something that we can go back to, but like in this particular case, we did revisit and made an adjustment.
I would also just urge both committee members and members of the public listening, again, to bring something up to the committee if you hear or sense that something is going on in town that seems like something the HRC should respond to. You know, we all run in slightly different circles, which is one of the committee's strengths. So what might be sort of a really obvious growing issue in one of our circles just might not have gotten on the radar of someone else. So it is beneficial to bring something up if it seems like something the HRC should respond to, and then we can assess whether it does fit within our parameters. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Okay. Let's move on to agenda item E, which is the going forward plan. So given all of this information, both nationally and locally, what is the HRC's plans going forward? Given, of course, the complete uncertainty of all of our lives about what we can plan and do going forward. So let's have a little discussion about what, if anything, could or should be done over the next few months.
Can you guys hear me? So I was thinking about this over the past few weeks. I would love to see some sort of training offered remotely, because I think that's our only option at this point, within our community around you know, addressing the current situation in some way, helping to get the community to think about things and how their reactions are important here. And I don't know if that's, you know, similar to maybe it's the unconscious bias training that we've done in the past. I know we as a committee have thought about doing that again. I don't know if the partner that we have who actually facilitated that is even, you know, thinking about doing that, offering that remotely, or maybe it's another topic entirely. But I think, you know, I attended one recently on interrupting unconscious bias. It was outside of this committee, but it was within an organization versus, you know, within a community. So there would be slight differences, but I personally found it extremely helpful, you know, over, you know, during this current environment, even more so than I had in the past. So I wonder, I guess I would just like to get your thoughts as a committee. You know, is this something that we should consider? And do you think that vendor facilitator that we used in the past is equipped to do something remotely or would be willing to do so?
I love where you're going, Allison. I think education, awareness, that's the way to go. Irene, I had the pleasure of attending a seminar through Personal Best Karate by, I think it's your friend or your friend's sister, Liza. What's her last name? How do you say her last name?
Talusa. Talusa.
It was fantastic. I shared it with Liz. It was a really awesome family focused, how to have tough conversations, talk about unconscious bias. She did a tremendous job finding examples for families to relate it to their own life and talking about perspective and the way different people view things different. It was just incredible. I wonder if we could reach out to her and ask her to do some more broadly for the community. I don't know if she'd be willing.
That
I think
sounds
that's a
like,
great idea.
sounds great. That sounds exactly like what I had in mind.
Yeah, I love that idea.
I was thinking of the same thing too. Something to do with like listening sessions, remote discussions about unconscious bias, talking to your kids, or understanding where we are right now. Even reading articles, sharing your thoughts on certain articles, or book readings. Anything that would involve discussion on a topic that's relevant right now, I think would be helpful for our community.
I think when I look across town too, I know my son is going into 7th grade, and his book reading or his required reading over the summer takes on racial themes and deconstructs as well. So we, as being a member in the superintendent's advisory committee, we haven't been able to meet because of COVID. And I know that the school committee, Michelle, I know that, folks are aware. We always say, yes, they're students, but they always go home, right? So we can do what we can in the classroom, and we can try to engage and try to have these conversations. And also, how do we offer them? Sometimes I feel like I don't want to have just the same people going, who, that old adage, preaching to the choir. But how can we make that a more robust or voice? And I don't know the answer to that. My hope is actually maybe if it's a virtual forum, one of the positives is it's a lot easier to go, and schedules, you can't go anywhere. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think both the virtual forum and the climate, the people will be interested in participating in those kinds of things, and that we should sponsor a series of things over the course of the year related
How
to.
will we fund them?
Well, question.
Right, because we don't have a budget. So occasionally there are pots of money we can access, primarily from Stonehill's donation to the town, but that is always the perennial challenge for our committee. We have sort of different needs and goals than many other town committees, but not the flexibility of being our own organization or nonprofit where we can fundraise. There is a mechanism for people to donate to the Human Rights Committee, which is outlined on our webpage, but it involves making a donation to town, which is presented either in writing or in person to the Board of Selectmen to ask to be earmarked specifically to our committee. And we applaud anyone who would go through those steps, but it's usually more steps than anyone would bother doing to donate to a cause that they support.
And how did you fund the workshop before?
I think that was Stonehill money. Okay. Wasn't it, Craig?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that I'm thinking about as we're talking about it is whether or not partnering with other groups in town to sponsor trainings, workshops, listening sessions. I'm thinking about the Kelly Lamb's group, the Raising Multicultural Kids. I'm thinking about the Old Colony Y. I'm thinking about a number of different groups in town that are not constrained like we are in terms of raising funds or having funds available for something like that. And it also broadens the appeal of the, for people to attend that kind of an activity or a training or a listening session, because there's a larger group of sponsors that then draws more participants, I think. And I would hope that would be something we could explore with people like Kelly Lamb, et cetera, about whether they would be interested in doing those kinds of things. And Stonehill,
So
for
just
that
as a
matter.
reminder in terms of training, so the last training that we held, it was the active bystander training. It was actually sponsored by, as Craig mentioned, actually it was the Old Colony Y helped to sponsor that event for us. It was
Right.
We had very limited community interest in the event. I just want to put that out there. I think we needed at least 15 to run the event, and we just made 15 because I dragged one of my kids to come with me. But I mean, it was a great opportunity to receive some training. I do think, as Kathy mentioned, that we'll likely have more folks interested in this, considering it would be a remote opportunity, as well as the fact that our current climate would generate, I think, some additional interest. But I do think it would be great, Allison, as you mentioned, to be able to offer some training during this time frame for sure. And we can absolutely start to pull together some vendors, maybe start with the person that Irene knows, and start to reach out and think about timing as well as cost.
And I don't have a great pulse on facilitator training organizations, but I do wonder if there are possibly some out there who might be willing to invest in pro bono time on stuff like this.
My other question. Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's always happens with Zoom calls. I'll reach out to Liza and let everybody know. Unless you know her better and you want to, Irene.
No, you can go ahead.
Okay.
I know her sister more.
Okay.
Great. Yeah. I do have a question though, also for these remote discussions. Is there a way for ECAT to be involved so we could have it recorded? That way we could have it in our website and people could view it at their own time. Because sometimes the times are a little bit tougher to attend. So at least if we have some way for people to go and view it at a later time, I think we would get a better number, more people attending.
I think it all depends on the contract. There are some vendors who won't allow for it.
Okay.
I also, to a couple of points that have been made, if we can pinpoint people who might be also interested in being trained, perhaps there are, and I understand teachers, I understand their contracts, I understand, just townspeople. If there are folks in which we can identify, there's also people who live in town, who this is their skill set. So it's number one, who can we partner with, not just for participation levels, but also for possible funding opportunities. And then B, are we aware of people in town who might be willing to do this work or know people who do this work for free? And also, are there free resources in general? Does the ADL offer anything? Is that, is there a grant? Is there something, obviously I don't have time to write a grant right now, but if you're moving forward, this might be something, and would that fall within maybe not this committee, or who in our town could we identify to write a grant that actually might help fund these issues outside of the pilot program from First Stonehill? I mean, we have a college right in our town. There might be faculty members who are more than willing to engage in this dialogue free of charge for us.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here because I hear two themes here. So one is that training would be a good resource to offer this summer, given that much of our life is anticipated to still be remote over the summer. All right, so there's a great way to capture interest that we haven't been able to capture in person. And it sounds like some of you are going to explore different vendors, both for cost, feasibility, size, recording, all of those aspects, which we can report back. The other aspect I hear us getting at is partnerships within the community. It come up at our February meeting, I believe, when we had talked about important community stakeholders and kind of assessed the status of our relationships with them, and particularly the ones where we wanted to strengthen or build our relationships with different stakeholders. I don't recall where we left that. I know it was not the March meeting. I want to say it was January or February. I think we were going to have something of like a script before we farmed out who was going to reach out to which institution, something of like a standard intro for phone or email about the purpose and going forward. Because this even gets back to Kathy's point, like, who knows we're here, who knows what the HRC does, who thinks of the HRC when they do things which are related to the HRC. So do we think that's something we can take on as well this summer, the relationship strengthening, or does that feel off target?
I think that feels on target, but can we be really direct with them and try to ask for help or support in whatever way we think is best as we reintroduce ourselves?
I think it's hard because we were so remote to be able to, it's much easier in person to talk about, we talked about going and meeting with different organizations and people. I don't know.
I think it's really on target right now. I think people are looking for resources to be able to kind of either cope or explain or educate. And I think that we should totally leverage our position, during this time to be able to be that one of those resources for people.
To alleviate the awkwardness maybe of a remote cold call to someone, I think our plan was for the entities where we felt like there was room to strengthen our relationship. I think we were going to start with people who felt like they already had something of a relationship with people there. So it wasn't completely out of the blue.
Yeah, that sounds right, Liz. Also, I mean, now's the time to call on the people that we have great relationships with too, like the library and, whoever else.
I think if Amy, if I had more information about the training that you went to, and that I could then go to the Old Colony Y or to other people and say, we're interested in expanding the opportunity within the community, given what's been going on across the country, that might be easier for the intro if I knew more about the specifics of that kind of training, to see if anybody's really interested in it. And I agree with Kathy that the time is probably right to reach out to people and begin. Given that 500 people were involved in the rally on Sunday, which I think was incredible, and the other kind of peaceful rallies that have occurred across the country.
Okay, so I think we need a point person on training at this point to coordinate which entities we're reaching out to, who is reaching out to them, and can give us a summary. And I feel like we need another point person, or maybe not, about relationships, right? Saying like, you want to help out, like we could use funding for a training, we're working on who and what, or maybe they might have ideas, or like Beth, you were saying with Stonehill, Professor X, director of so-and-so could serve that role. Karen, you are our list and action person. What do you think is the best approach right now?
You're on mute.
Okay, how about now? So it sounds like from a training perspective, it sounds like we may each have some potential vendors who might be interested either in some pro bono work or even a lighter fee potentially to help support our community and our committee. And so I would say reach out, and then anybody want to serve as kind of a point of contact to try to pull that information together before our next meeting?
Yeah, I can do that.
Are there any particular themes? I mean, we talked about implicit bias.
We talked about unconscious bias. We talked about privilege, I think, last time around. I think that was a topic that we mentioned would be great to educate a bit on, and might have actually a variety of audience members, just age-wise, that might be interested in a topic like that.
I think it also depends on who is willing, Beth, and what their expertise is. Do you have any ideas about Stonehill, or are you just?
That's what I'm trying to think of right now. The person who, there's somebody at Bridgewater who, she's not at the VP level, but she lives right down the street in Brockton. She works with mostly students, but she runs a multicultural center. So she might be a good person. I know there's folks at Stonehill who I can say, hey, listen, this is what we're looking for. I also think we can have conversations about implicit bias or and white privilege. I also think that there's sometimes just needs to be a dialogue, and we need to be able to put ourselves in a space to be uncomfortable. And how do we also process and learn from that as well? So there's people who I work with in town. In my mind, I'm thinking of a couple, and just microaggressions and understanding the impact of microaggressions, right? Impact versus intent and what that looks like. And I think we also need to be, for me, create a space that folks can feel comfortable, right? This stuff is uncomfortable. We're afraid to make mistakes. We're afraid to say something stupid, so we don't say anything at all. Or we're afraid to put ourselves outside of a box, or how that might impact. And I think we have to create, or I would hope, and most facilitators do this, kind of set those ground rules, right? That and allow people to live and to learn from one another. I'm not saying certain terminology, but this is hard. And I think we have to acknowledge that, and maybe that's a whole different ball of wax, or maybe that's a whole different training, like a step one. The last thing that I want to have happen is that, it's that inoculation philosophy where, you get your vaccination, there's no boosters. So I would want us to plan what's our kind of booster shots that we're going to be getting, what's our scheduled vaccinations that we would have across the line, because we can't just take what's happening right now and respond to it. I think we can take and learn from it and then continue to grow and provide, throughout. It shouldn't just be, well, for the next 3 weeks, this is what we're going to be doing. My hope would be this just becomes a series in which we continue to have these dialogues, and those will progress as well.
So that's a second aspect of what we can offer, our sort of dialogue / listening session forums, which are pretty broad, right? There are a lot of ways to get at, I think, what I heard Beth saying, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting it, right? But training is one thing, right? That's formalized, it has a specific topic, there's a specific goal. Conversations are different, right? This is a free space, and it might happen within a training to talk about specific subjects or simply to listen. Maybe this is when you have members of the community come and just say, this is what it's like to be me in the community, right? This is what I've experienced. This is what we were talking about initially. If the neighbors who are no longer living in Easton might be willing to come back and say, like, this is what our experience was as an interracial family.
Yeah, and we've been discussing this topic of a listening session for quite some time, right? The committee, we've been talking through what do we want to try and gain from a listening session. I think one of the biggest challenges as a committee is the fact that we don't have a lot of data to work with, right? We don't necessarily always have the pulse on what's happening in Easton, because it's not something that's a kind of, stories are not accumulated somewhere where we could access. So it's been difficult, and I think we've been trying to find ways to connect with the community through the various events that we've held or attended. So a listening session, I think that format would be great, where we could try and have some goals, clearly state them. I do think that in this environment, even being able to have that listening session online may encourage greater participation. So people don't have to necessarily come in person, but could attend online. I don't know, I think maybe we finish the conversation around training first, just so that we can make sure that that's an action item. I know Amy's trying to capture all of this dialogue kind of back and forth, but it would be great to kind of just maybe finish that piece off and then segue into the listening session piece, and then start to think about how we want to approach that piece.
So is the timing goal then a training for possibly July and listening session August / September? Is that what I hear you saying?
Well, I think if everybody reaches out to if they know somebody or a vendor or someone they think that would be willing to lead on a particular topic, we pull all that information together. We look at what the topics are and who who wants to do it and who we can afford to pay if we have to, and maybe look at something over the course of the next 6 months or 8 months.
Liz, I was just going to say, would it be possible to reverse that and do a listening session first? That way we can have the listening session and then decide on training according to what we've learned from that session.
Certainly. What do the rest of you think?
I will say that Liza's the training I took is a million% relevant immediately, like today, regardless of what we hear in a listening session. So if she's willing to do it, I would say we do it whenever she can.
Amy, I'm interested myself in attending Liza's training. Something that's been on my mind for a bit now, and I think a lot of other people are in the same boat. So I think that's a great suggestion.
Okay, so for a listening session, that is not anything that we have a cost to run, right? And we can certainly partner with other groups to do it. The question is sort of setting out the parameters, like what are we there to hear stories about? Because as a reminder to the members of the public, while there's certainly a lot of very relevant and important conversation going on about people of color, the mission and the charge of the Human Rights Committee is broader than simply racial and ethnic issues. It goes to disability and ableism and sexual orientation and basically any religion, any form of discrimination. So race is certainly a timely topic, but there are opportunities to talk about discriminatory experiences for other reasons.
I mean, I love Beth's idea of this being an ongoing thing. If we can get a format down, race is the most relevant right now, but I think that over time we could have a target topic or a target question or I don't know. Okay.
So we come back to format. Does anyone feel comfortable taking a stab at outlining sort of the format, the title, the purpose, something to put out there so it's clear to the public what the purpose is? One of the challenges we've had in trying to do this in the past is making sure it was clear that we are not equipped to act on much of the information we hear. Like problems that happen in the school have to be reported through the school. Problems that happen which may fit a crime have to be reported through the police. Like we aren't a reporting agency. So to make it clear that the purpose of the listening is simply to learn and hear so that no sharers feel perhaps disappointed or misled with the Human Rights Committee not taking the lead on following up on their particular experif.
Liz, I'll take a stab at that.
Okay.
I'd like to try that. See
okay. If. All right. Sounds good. Alifi's going to have a busy June.
Yeah, Alifi, let me know if you want to work together or bounce ideas off each other.
Thanks, Amy.
Yeah, I'd be happy to help you as well.
Thank you.
Okay. So let's, that will be one of our action items until our next meeting. And remember that we can update each other and solicit feedback individually, never as a group.
This may be a silly technical question, but could we share a document or is that considered people speaking back and forth?
No, like we've done in the past, you share a document, you say like, here's an update on my research, which we'll talk about at the next meeting. Or if you have comments or feedback, please reply only to me.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds like a reasonable task list for the next couple months until our next meeting. All right, at this point, I'm going to pause and address a couple questions I've seen come up. One is from Hannah Toe at 148 Randall Street. Other than the Human Rights Committee, what efforts is Easton making in general to make people of color feel more comfortable and welcome in the town? you know, Hannah, I think I can only speak to what the HRC has done. And I would again point you to our website where we've documented the events we hold and we run and the trainings. Craig Barger is our representative from the select board, and Michelle Durrance is our representative from the school committee. And I would imagine their websites also have information about what, you know, what their respective groups are doing. But I think absent information about specific problems, which we know are there, but we don't know specifically, because people tend not to share hurtful information where they might have been made to feel unwelcome. It's hard for us to act directly, which is, I think, what one of the goals of the listening session is, or the series, is to find more of that information about how people of color, among other groups, might be made to feel unwelcome in town, and how the Human Rights Committee can do more education to help. Michelle, were you going to comment?
I was just saying she might reach out to Kelly Lamb as well, because that's another group that's doing a lot. And Hannah, I can reach out to you and get you that contact information.
Yeah, so Kelly Lamb is one of the co-chairs of Raising Multicultural Kids, which is an independent nonprofit group in town that was formed specifically to address issues that students of color were experiencing in town. So certainly a complementary mission to the HRC, but a little bit narrower, and because they are a different organizational format, sort of different capacity about what they can do and how they respond. Michelle, this is really a question for you to address from Georgina Englishby at 212 Main Street. There is little or no representation of teachers, mentors, or counseling services of color in any of the schools currently. Is there any way the committee can advocate for this?
Actually, if who is this from? Georgina?
Yeah.
Georgina, if you can find last night's school committee meeting on ECAT, I know that Dr. Cabral addressed this issue and all the things that she is doing within her personal superintendent goals and various committees that she has, and kind of her personal, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but that would be a really good school committee meeting to go back and rewatch and hear all the things, because that kind of question came up multiple times, or questions like that last night from participants.
And I would just add, structurally, that's the point of having Michelle as a school committee representative and Craig as a select board representative and Officer Badoud as the civil rights officer, is to have that liaison between these other important institutions and stakeholders in town, so that they know the Human Rights Committee exists and there's a very clear channel of communication to enable these groups to work together. So any concerns that the HRC has related to the schools tends to be funneled through Michelle as the representative to take back to the committee, and similarly, she brings the response back. There's another question from Helen Harlow at 63 North Main Street in North Easton. Could there be an invitation to Black townspeople of Easton to participate on this committee? So I would say there is always an invitation for anyone to join this committee or any other committee. Openings for town committees are always made available both on the weekly email, the town crier, and on the town's website. So we always encourage anyone who is interested in joining our committee to put in an application or reach out to current members. We welcome people who are interested in our mission. Okay, any other questions so far? All right, so that brings us to agenda item F. So as we all know, board positions and chair and vice chair positions turn over on July 1. I do have a go ahead from Connor to have some follow-up meetings. I don't know exactly when they're going to be or what form it's going to take. It's highly likely it will still be by Zoom. So I don't have a date yet for our next meeting. That's a little still TBD. It is something for the committee to think about who might want to take on chair and possibly vice chair responsibilities, and whether new positions might be appropriate to help spread the workload. So I gave just sort of a brief summary of, what I can think of that is asked of the chair. And I know all of you are interested in maybe a few of those things, but maybe not all of them. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'm happy to answer questions, as I'm sure Karen is. Do we have any suggestions maybe for moving forward?
I think people are stunned that you're not interested in serving for another couple of years, Liz. So maybe that's why the silence is there.
Yeah,
I don't say anything. You're stuck with it.
I think 3 years of leadership is a good time for changeover, irrespective of the organization. I think it's good to have different people in charge. So again, feel free to email me or Karen privately, or work it out amongst yourselves, but just keep that in mind for our next meeting, because that issue will need to be resolved. Kathy.
I have a question. Whose terms run out at the end of June? And are people leaving or staying?
Irene and Karen and I expire in June. Craig, your term expires. And if it's not you, it would be someone else, right?
Yeah, I'm hoping it's going to be me.
Good, we are too.
And technically mine does, but we've already redone our position. So barring unforeseen outcomes of the election, I've already been put in for the next year.
Okay, good.
And I assume that those of you who are, I don't think the word expiring is a good term. I think I'd
Depends what we look like these days.
Right.
That is everybody who is whose term is ending interested in returning?
Yes.
Irene said yes. I didn't hear from Karen.
Pretty sure yes.
So I'm open. If it would be easier to have a vacancy, and that might help things transition to someone new taking over the chair role, I am open to not renewing my term, which is why, Craig, I haven't filled out any forms yet. So I'm happy to stay on as a member. I will not be staying on to continue as chair. And again, if just chemistry wise, it works better to have someone new, and I'm open to that. So that's kind of where I am.
I think you're a great resource for the committee. I would hate to lose you.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I agree.
I think the only way to keep her would be if somebody would be willing to take on the chair position who's currently a member.
Yeah,
I think that there is some precedent for several committees that have had co-chairs, so that you can spread the responsibility between several people as opposed to having just one person do the whole thing. I'm looking at a couple of my friends on the committee right now who I think would be fantastic for leadership roles, but I won't say that until they.
I think he's talking to you, Beth.
You're looking at them, Craig.
Karen, are you deciding whether to stay or like accept a vice chair if you stay on the committee, or a member? Like, what's your interest level?
Oh, I definitely want to, similar to Liz, I would like to continue to stay part of the committee. But again, I don't want to hold up a spot if there's opportunity for other folks to come on board that would like a position.
I will tell you one thing that has worked very well for Karen and for me is that we do complement each other nicely. So we've had a very close working relationship to work through timely issues, things that come up in between meetings. And there's certainly space for less to come to the chair, right? I mean, we had floated this at some prior meetings as well. Like, I think there's definitely space for a communications, point person, which would certainly relieve the chair of some responsibilities. I think the most important attribute for the chair is the ability to be the point person and to handle time-sensitive issues like things which have come up in the last week. That would be sort of one of the prerequisites. But for instance, if you're not into checking email, that could be the communications chair. If the administrative task of ensuring we have quorum and scheduling the meetings is not your jam, like, someone else can do it. So again, I would just encourage you to take a look at the list, see if any of the tasks are ones you would take on, and then maybe have a little conversation amongst yourselves about how to divvy it up and what to call everyone. Okay, let's move on to other action items, which is G. Anything else to go over that we haven't gone over already?
Excuse me, Liz, I have to back out because my wife has a Zoom meeting at 7, so I have to give up the computer. So it's wonderful to see everybody, and thank you for your service to the town. And we'll see you on the 22nd at the town meeting, and hopefully on the 27th for the town election. So have a good night, everybody.
Take care, Craig.
Right.
And everyone, this is Allison. I'm still here. I just am having webcam issues, so I can see you. I'm sorry you can't see me.
We can see a nice picture of you.
Yeah, you look great.
Oh, no.
All right, it sounds like no other action items. Public participation, we have been addressing. So attendees, if you have any last questions or comments, now would be a time to type them in. I think we've worn down the time constraints of many of our attendees, or at least they wanted to go eat dinner. Okay, so in the absence of any further public participation, let's have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
So moved.
All right, Kathy, motion, second.
Second.
Beth, seconds. All right, Aliki, roll call, adjourn the meeting. Yes or no?
Yes, sorry.
Durant,
Durant, yes.
Hirschman,
Yes.
Dean.
Yes.
Oh, Stephanie, I forget your last name. Cantave?
Yep, and yes.
Okay, good. Chan,
Yes.
Virtually.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the meeting is now adjourned at 6:53 p.m. Thanks, everyone. It was
Thank
really
you,
good to
everyone.
see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Okay, for attending.
Night.
Good
Night.
night.